The mountains of eastern Afghanistan stood jagged and sharp against the dim horizon. Their ridgelines, black silhouettes that caught the first hints of pale light. The air was thin and cold, carrying the faint scent of dust and rock, and every breath came with a weight that reminded the team how far they were from safety. Into this landscape moved SEAL Team 2, quiet in their approach, trained bodies flowing with the terrain as if every movement had been rehearsed. At the center of their small formation, Staff Sergeant Emily Johnson adjusted the strap of her headset and carried the compact load of radios, targeting devices, and folded maps that made her role vital. She was not Navy, not one of them by blood or tradition, but she had been attached for months now, and even if some looked past her, she knew the value she brought. The mission had been written as simple: insert before dawn, establish surveillance on a compound suspected of housing a Taliban commander, and extract with what they had observed. If the night stayed quiet, they would leave without firing a shot. If things escalated, Emily's responsibility was clear. She was the line between the men on the ridge and the roar of air power above them. Her voice on the radio meant precision strikes when needed and safe extraction when things turned against them. It was a role defined in doctrine, one that emphasized communication, coordination, and the disciplined ability to call down fire without endangering the very people standing around her. Emily had trained for years to reach this point. The combat controller pipeline was brutal, a course with failure rates so high that most who tried never reached the end. Physical exhaustion, mental stress, and the demand for exact technical mastery were designed to strip away all but the most capable. She had pushed through mastering the radios, the targeting procedures, the air-ground coordination, and the grueling physical tests that left even strong men broken. Among the skills, she had also shown a natural eye for marksmanship. Instructors had noticed it, noted her calm, the way she slowed her breathing until the shot came steady, the way she treated the rifle as an extension of thought rather than muscle. It was not her job to be a sniper, but the ability lingered in her background, a skill sharpened and filed away, waiting for a day when it might matter. On the ridge, she worked methodically. Her small notebook, folded and worn, carried notes from mission prep, hand-drawn lines of wind drift and signal frequencies. Her scope sat beside her, angled for quick target coordinates if needed. The lenses polished clear despite the dust. The headset hummed with distant voices from command nets, each channel alive with its own rhythm, each ready for her to step in with clarity. She checked her satellite link twice. Then once again, not from doubt, but because she lived by precision. Around her, the SEALs prepared their own gear. Petty Officer Michael Rodriguez glassed the compound through high-powered optics. James Martinez scanned the approach lines, every muscle ready for sudden movement. Lieutenant David Patterson, their officer in charge, studied the ground and kept his tone clipped. All business. For them, Emily was the quiet link to overhead support, someone essential yet not central to their identity as a fighting team. She let them think of her that way. Quiet competence required no announcements. She sat steady on the rock shelf, breath calm, heartbeat unhurried. The compound lay below, a scatter of buildings cut into the valley floor. Nothing stirred yet. Though intelligence claimed a high-value commander was inside, the stillness pressed in, the kind of silence before dawn when even the birds held their breath. For Emily, it was familiar. The ridges around them felt like teeth ready to close. But she trusted her training, her preparation, and her calm. The mission should have been routine. Insert, watch, extract. Yet Afghanistan had a way of turning routine into something else. Patterns shifted without warning, and silence often broke into fire. Emily knew it in her bones. The folded checklist at her side, the scope across her lap, and the headset carrying voices from miles away, all of it reminded her that no mission here remained simple for long. The ridge overlooked the valley like a natural wall, Steep rock faces, providing both cover and danger, SEAL Team 2 moved with practiced discipline, spreading out across the ledge to establish their observation post. They had chosen the position carefully, balancing concealment with line of sight. Martinez, the point man, shifted low across a cluster of jagged stone, eyes sharp behind the scope of his rifle. Rodriguez adjusted his optics toward the compound, noting faint signs of activity but nothing that justified engagement. Patterson remained at the center, posture tense but steady, his authority binding the team together. Emily Johnson knelt near the communications gear, headset snug against her ears, hands adjusting dials with a confidence that came from repetition. Her position on the ridge was not glamorous, but every man on the team knew that if the sky needed to answer, she was the one who could call it. The air was thin, carrying only the occasional whistle of wind. Static hissed softly in her ears as she scanned across 3 separate networks. One channel tied her to headquarters, another linked her to aviation units, and a third bound her to immediate emergency support. She logged their clarity on her notepad, drawing faint lines that matched each frequency. Here targeting equipment sat propped beside here. The scope aligned carefully with the valley below. Every adjustment she made was precise. Small corrections that could mean survival when the moment came. For a brief time, the world seemed still. Then Martinez's voice cut across the team channel, controlled but edged with alertness. He had spotted movement beyond the ridgeline perimeter. Small groups were approaching, not haphazardly, but with intent. Their paths converged like streams feeding a river, flowing in 3 directions toward the American position. Rodriguez scanned next, confirming silhouettes moving with cover discipline. Patterson froze for only a breath before giving his order. Emily, prepare extraction. His tone carried urgency without panic. She acknowledged instantly, shifting her attention from the compound to the airspace. Her voice remained calm as she established contact with the Joint Operations Center. Extraction assets were being alerted, helicopters positioned for rapid deployment. Her pencil scratched against her checklist, noting time, bearing, and wind drift. The SEALs crouched lower, weapons oriented outward, forming a defensive arc. Dust plumes flickered faintly at the edges of the valley. This was not random foot traffic. It was a net being drawn tight. Emily's experience told her more than the eye could see. The pattern of approach was too deliberate. One group pushed forward to fix the team's attention, while others angled wide, preparing to seal escape routes. It was not the usual hit-and-run tactic she had studied from past Taliban encounters. These were layered maneuver, overlapping fields of fire designed to suffocate movement. She felt the ridge pressing against them. What once had seemed like high ground, now becoming a trap. Static surged briefly in her ear as overlapping transmissions collided. One pilot reported weather shifts. A second voice cautioned about surface-to-air threats in the region. The channels tangled, voices stacking until they blurred. Emily worked methodically, separating them, logging call signs, clearing interference. Her composure was steady even as urgency rose around her. The others prepared rifles, checked ammunition, and shifted nervously behind stone cover. Martinez muttered about containment. Rodriguez cursed under his breath. Patterson watched the encroaching shapes with sharp calculation, but Emily was already charting their geometry. She marked each bearing, noting how the angles converged. To her eyes, the battlefield was not chaos but a map of intent. 3 coordinated movements pressing inward, designed to force the team to break cover into exposed fire. Even elite forces could be undone when the enemy learned their rhythm. She felt the truth settle in her chest. This was no coincidence. These fighters had studied American tactics, and they were exploiting them now. While the SEALs braced themselves, Emily remained the quiet constant. Her headset connected her to distant voices. Her scope revealed shadows no one else tracked, and her notepad carried the details that could decide survival. The ridge still held them above the valley, but its teeth now seemed to close inward. She breathed once, steady and deliberate, knowing that the trap had already been sprung. The silence on the ridge shattered in an instant. A single sharp crack cut the air, followed by the whine of a round snapping past Rodriguez's shoulder. Another report echoed from the opposite slope. Then another from the valley floor. Within seconds, the team was enveloped in a storm of fire. Dust burst from the rock face as bullets chipped away fragments, sending shards across the men's faces. Martinez dove flat behind a boulder, his voice sharp over the net as he called out contact to the east. Heavy machine gun fire joined in, the long thrum hammering from a concealed nest on the ridgeline. The sound rolled through the valley like thunder, echoing off the mountains until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. Patterson shouted orders, his voice cutting through the chaos with clipped precision. But every attempt to maneuver met with a new burst of fire. When Rodriguez leaned to shift his position, a sniper round smacked the stone inches from his cheek, showering him with grit. Movement in any direction drew fire from another angle. Emily kept her body low, headset pressed tight against her ears. Static and overlapping voices filled the channel as she fought to raise higher command. Her voice remained calm, professional, reporting their position, the volume of fire, and requesting immediate close air support. The reply came flat, almost mechanical. Aviation assets delayed. Weather ceiling too low. Surface-to-air threats in the area. Minimum delay, 30 minutes. She pressed for alternatives, her words clear. But the answer did not change. They were on their own. The men around her cursed as the trap became obvious. Every field of fire overlapped with another, creating a cage of bullets that locked them in place. The Taliban had studied them, learned the methods of American special operations, and turned them against the team. Where the SEALs relied on speed and unpredictability, their enemy used containment and precision. Patterson recognized it as quickly as Emily did, his jaw tight as he directed fields of fire to keep their perimeter intact. The rocks around them sparked and spat with impacts, the acrid smell of cordite mixing with the fine dust kicked up by constant ricochets. Rodriguez's voice rose in anger as another sniper round forced him down. Martinez tried to mark one position, but before he could, a second nest on the opposite flank opened fire, pinning him flat. The team was trapped in a lethal triangle, every attempt at counterfire smothered by another angle. Patterson called for smoke, but the wind pulled it away too fast to provide cover. The mountains that had seemed their advantage now closed around them like bars of a cage. Emily wrote quickly in her notebook, sketching angles from muzzle flashes, marking bearings, and cross-referencing with her targeting scope. To her, the battlefield was not only chaos, it was a pattern waiting to be solved. Her headset filled again with overlapping calls from headquarters, one operator asking for confirmation, another warning her not to expose their position further. She kept her tone steady, ignoring the fear in the air around her. As she logged every frequency and timed each volley of fire, the SEALs were breathing hard, sweat cutting through the dust on their faces. Rodriguez shouted that they were boxed in. Martinez added that reinforcements were moving up the slope. Patterson glanced toward Emily, the look in his eyes confirming what they both knew. 30 minutes without air support was a death sentence if they stayed pinned. The gunfire slowed only long enough for the enemy to reload, then returned with renewed force. Rock fragments cut across Emily's gloves as she steadied her scope, catching glimpses of flashes others could not see. She forced her breathing calm, heart steady, as she searched the storm for weaknesses. Around here, the men fought to survive. Inside her mind, she was already charting the lines that might break the cage. Emily steadied her scope again, forcing herself to block out the noise of ricochets and shouts. Through the smoke and dust, she caught the faint rhythm of muzzle flashes, one to the east, firing in 3-round bursts from the shadow of a cave, another to the south, using a jagged stone shelf to mask his position, timing shots to pin Rodriguez every time he shifted. The third was harder to track, but the telltale arc of muzzle flash in the west revealed the commander, the one orchestrating the ambush. She traced the angles quickly in her notebook, lines crossing their position like blades. Those three shooters weren't just participating in the fight, they were controlling it. "Lieutenant?" she called, her voice clear but tight with urgency. "I have eyes on 3 sniper nests. East Cave, South Ridge Shelf, West Slope. They're directing the fire." Patterson glanced at her, sweat cutting a path through the dust on his temple. "Your job is extraction coordination. Johnson, keep those channels open. We can't afford a blackout." His tone was clipped, absolute. A man under crushing responsibility. Emily kept her eyes on the scope. "Sir, we won't make extraction with those nests alive. They own the routes. I can take them." Patterson shook his head sharply. "You're not a designated marksman. I need you on comms." Her voice didn't rise. It stayed steady. Anchored. Combat controller training included precision marksmanship. I qualified with the M24 and beyond. I know these shots. They're exposed in rhythm. Give him a chance. The crack of a round smashed into the stone beside Martinez, spraying fragments across his face. He swore, voice ragged over the net. Patterson cursed under his breath, scanning their dwindling options. Emily turned toward him fully now, headset pushed slightly aside. The notebook with its lines open on her knee. "You know it's true. Every second they fire, they adjust us into kill zones. Air support is 30 minutes out. We don't have 30 minutes. For a moment, Patterson looked like a man caught between the rulebook and survival, his eyes locked on hers, reading the calm certainty there. Around them, the fight raged. But in that narrow space between commander and controller, silence pressed close. Rodriguez shifted his rifle toward her, unspoken acknowledgement that the M24 lay within reach. Its dark metal caught the faintest glint of morning light, a weapon meant for trained snipers, not for the comm specialist now asking to shoulder its weight. Emily reached for it. Slow and deliberate, she felt its balance settle in her hands, heavier than her usual kit, yet familiar. Her training came back sharp in memory, the long hours of range drills, the patient corrections of instructors who had once told her she had a natural eye. She had filed that skill away. Never the core of her job, but always there. Patterson exhaled hard, the sound half swallowed by another burst of fire. "Johnson," he said, his voice low but cutting, "you've got authorization. Make your shots count. We don't get a second chance." She nodded once, firm and silent. The headset slipped to rest against the rock. The notebook stayed open beside her, lines frozen mid-calculation. The ridge around them felt like a trap. But in Emily's hands, the vantage had shifted. She adjusted the rifle into position, her calm presence. Now, the axis on which the team's survival turned, Emily eased the M24 into place. The weight of it, grounding her against the chaos raging on the ridge. The rifle had been Rodriguez's tool until now, carried for the possibility of a high-value shot, but it lay in her hands with the inevitability of choice. Around her, bullets chipped the stone, sending sharp fragments across her sleeves. Martinez cursed as another round cracked past his position. Patterson kept his eyes forward, forcing himself to trust the gamble he had just allowed. She adjusted the bipod legs until the rifle settled flush against the rock shelf, her cheek pressed into the stock, her hands steady as she began the quiet ritual that training had drilled into her bones. The sniper in the cave to the east had been firing in measured rhythm. 3 rounds. Pause. Then 3 more. She logged it unconsciously, her pencil-sharp memory already charting the seconds between each exposure. 6 seconds on average. Enough to time a window. Emily dialed the scope. Glass sharpening on the cave mouth, 650 meters away. Heat shimmered faintly in the early light. but the angles were clear. She measured the wind drift by the sway of dust along the ridge, adjusted 1/2 mil left, and slowed her breathing until her chest barely moved. Around here, gunfire cracked and ricocheted, but inside the circle of her scope, there was only stillness, waiting for the figure to appear. The sniper's barrel edged forward first, smoke ghosting out of the stone. Then came the faint silhouette of his head and shoulder, rising to fire again. Emily did not tense. She timed it, let the sight settle, and pressed the trigger with smooth pressure that felt almost gentle. The rifle cracked, the sound sharp and final, echoing across the valley. For a heartbeat, nothing changed. Then the enemy shooter collapsed backward, his rifle clattering out of view. The cave went silent. The incoming fire from the east ceased abruptly, leaving a sudden gap in the storm that had pinned them. Dust settled where it had been torn apart moments earlier. Rodriguez blinked, his jaw tight as he whispered over the net. Target down. Martinez lifted his head just long enough to confirm before ducking again, disbelief written in his eyes. Patterson did not speak immediately. He looked at Emily, saw her already adjusting the scope, and simply nodded once in recognition. Emily said nothing. She logged the result in her notebook with a quick stroke, then shifted her focus toward the second nest. Her breathing remained steady, her hands smooth. The rifle was no longer borrowed. It was hers for as long as the team needed. The battlefield had shifted. Where moments before there had been only chaos, now there was the edge of possibility. One shot had silenced a controlling hand. The SEALs felt it, the sudden space to breathe. But Emily did not pause to celebrate. She was already hunting the next rhythm in the storm. Emily adjusted her scope again, shifting from the now silent cave toward the southern ridge. Dust still hung in the air, but through it she caught the shape of stone, the faint shimmer of heat, and the sliver of a barrel slipping in and out of view. This shooter was disciplined, firing then shifting deeper into cover, never exposing more than a narrow profile. Her quick calculation put the range at 720 meters. It was further, harder, with less room for error. She steadied her elbows against the rock and slowed her pulse. Her training echoed back in memory. Long days at the range, instructors drilling patience and calculation. She studied the wind again, noting the drift in the dust trails and the angle of her teammates' smoke grenade residue pulling sideways. She adjusted 1/2 mil more, checked her breathing, and waited for the moment when the sniper would lean just far enough. The fire came suddenly. Sharp cracks aimed at Rodriguez's cover. The muzzle flashed, faint against the rock. Emily exhaled slowly, squeezed, and the rifle barked. The round struck home. She saw the body snap back, then fall still, the rifle clattering down the stone slope. For a second, the southern arc of fire went quiet. Relief rolled through the team like a breath they had been holding too long. But there was no time to linger. Patterson's voice carried a single word: west. It was the one Emily already knew would be the most difficult. She had tracked it before. The faint glimmer of a muzzle hidden by careful camouflage. This was the commander, the one calling the fight, coordinating the fields of fire that had caged them in. Without him, the enemy would fracture. With him alive, they could still be crushed. She shifted, body pressed low, adjusting her angle. The range stretched to nearly 800 meters, beyond what the rifle was rated for. Every variable mattered now. The wind had shifted again, sliding from the upper slope at irregular intervals. She watched it in the way the dust curled near the ridge, in the twitch of brush far below. Her pencil marks in the notebook gave her a guide, but here she had only instinct, calculation, and calm. The sniper fired again, a flash barely visible against the stone. Emily caught the angle, traced the line, and centered her reticle. Her chest tightened as she drew breath, then released it. She waited for her body to still, heartbeat slow, the world narrowing to glass. Crosshairs, and silence. Then she squeezed. The crack of the rifle was sharp, followed by a long pause that seemed to stretch forever. At 800 meters, the bullet's arc carried across shifting wind, pushing the very limit of her weapon. Then, through the scope, she saw it strike. The enemy sniper jerked violently and collapsed, his weapon sliding down the slope. The western ridge went still. For a moment, the battlefield froze. The overlapping fire that had pinned them simply stopped. The cage dissolved. Martinez raised his head in disbelief, muttering that it was impossible. Rodriguez swore under his breath, then gave a half-laugh of shock. Patterson looked toward Emily, his face taut with the knowledge of what she had just accomplished. Emily said nothing. Her breathing slowed again, hands steady, as she adjusted the rifle for safety. To her, it had been calculation, patience, and trust in her own skill. To the others, it had been a transformation. The combat controller, who was meant only to call for help, had become the decisive actor who broke the ambush. The mountains stood silent around them, witnesses to 3 perfect shots. In those moments of silence, respect replaced doubt, and survival was secured because one soldier dared to attempt what others thought impossible. The valley fell quiet in the wake of the last shot. For the first time in what felt like hours, there was no snapping crack of rifles, no heavy bursts from machine guns, only the slow echo of wind curling through the mountains. Dust drifted down from the ridge, where rounds had chipped stone to fragments, settling across the team's gear like ash. The silence was jarring, sharp against the memory of chaos, but it carried with it a sudden weight of possibility. The cage had been broken. Patterson raised his head cautiously, eyes narrowing as he scanned the western slope. Nothing moved. Rodriguez gave a low whistle. Disbelief still etched into his face. Martinez adjusted his position and muttered under his breath that the field had gone cold. None of them fully understood what they had just witnessed, only that the 3 shooters who had trapped them so completely were gone. Emily lowered the M24 carefully, setting it beside her with practiced calm. Her headset, which had been quiet during the moments of focus, slid back over her ears. She keyed the mic and spoke in her usual steady tone, reporting to higher headquarters that Overwatch fire had ceased and the team was maneuvering. To anyone listening, her voice carried no trace of what she had just done. She was once again the controller, not the shooter. With the pressure lifted, Patterson gave the order to advance. The team shifted from defensive cover, moving with new confidence down the ridge toward their original objective. The compound below was still active, but without coordinated overwatch, it lacked the lethal edge that had nearly broken them. They moved methodically, covering each other, clearing angles. Every step taken with the knowledge that survival was no longer slipping through their fingers. Inside the compound, they found exactly what intelligence had suggested might be there. Maps marked with operational zones, notebooks filled with codes, and communication devices carrying traces of intercepts. Rodriguez collected files and copied transmissions, while Martinez secured the outer perimeter. Patterson photographed diagrams that outlined the structure of a regional network responsible for multiple attacks. It was more than they had hoped for. It was intelligence that could cripple enemy planning across the region. All the while, Emily kept her headset alive, guiding their movements, logging times and coordinates, ensuring extraction remained aligned. Her notebook filled with notations as she shifted smoothly back into her primary role. To the others, it was as though the shots had been a brief interruption, a flash of hidden skill that had saved them. But now she was again the quiet professional who linked them to the wider fight. Patterson paused once, looking at her across the courtyard of the compound. His expression carried both astonishment and respect. He did not say the words then, not with the mission still unfolding, but the acknowledgement was clear in his eyes. Without her, the team would have been forced into retreat, possibly destroyed. With her, they had not only survived, but secured victory. When they finally moved toward extraction, The ridge no longer felt like a prison. It was simply high ground, passed and left behind. The enemy, leaderless without their overwatch, melted into the terrain, with none of the precision that had trapped the team earlier. The helicopter arrived on schedule, blades hammering the air as dust swirled upward in a storm. Emily guided the last calls, voice calm and precise. The headset, once a symbol of desperation, now carried them home with success. The M24 lay strapped to Rodriguez's pack again, its work finished. The mission that should have ended in defeat had instead closed in triumph, reclaimed by a decision and the courage of one who refused to yield. The debriefing room was plain, its walls bare, except for a single map pinned at the front and a whiteboard streaked with marker lines. The air carried the faint smell of coffee gone cold, mixed with the metallic tang of spent ammunition from gear still being cleaned outside. SEAL Team 2 sat stiff in their chairs, dust still clinging to their uniforms, each man carrying the weight of what they had just survived. At the far end of the table, Staff Sergeant Emily Johnson sat quietly, headset resting against her kit, her folded checklist tucked into her pocket. She had not asked for a seat at the center. She simply waited, eyes steady. As Patterson began the report, he spoke with the precision of a commander who understood how close they had come to disaster. He outlined the ambush, the enemy's overlapping fields of fire, and the 30-minute gap in air support that had left them exposed. His tone was clipped, factual. But when he reached the moment of decision, his gaze shifted toward Emily. He paused, then told the room plainly that the team was alive because of her. 3 shots, he said, made the difference between retreat and survival. 3 shots silenced the nests that had pinned them. 3 shots turned chaos into victory. Emily did not flinch under the attention. She acknowledged his words with a single nod, her face composed. To her, it had been necessity, not heroism. The rifle had been a tool, the opportunity, a calculation. Yet the silence that followed Patterson's words carried a weight of recognition rarely spoken in such rooms. Even Rodriguez, who had carried the rifle for months, gave her a look of quiet respect that needed no explanation. The analysis came next. Military experts pulled the data from her scope, logged the ranges, and reconstructed the shots on screens at headquarters. They studied the bullet trajectories, calculated wind drift, and compared her accuracy to sniper standards. The results were undeniable. Her first target had been neutralized at 650 meters, with near textbook precision. Her second shot, at 720 meters, required advanced timing that matched the level of trained snipers. The final strike, at 800 meters, lay at the edge of the weapon's effective range. Yet the hit had been clean, lethal, and decisive. The experts conferred quietly, then confirmed that her performance exceeded expectations. 2 days later, orders arrived from Special Operations Command. Emily Johnson was to report for advanced sniper training, formalizing what she had demonstrated on the ridge. She would remain a combat controller, but she would also become something more dual qualified, capable of directing the skies and silencing threats with her own hand when the situation demanded it. Few carried both roles. Fewer still had proven them in the field before they were ever recognized. The transformation was subtle, yet profound. She did not celebrate. She did not speak of pride. Instead, she refolded her checklist, tucked it back into her gear, and prepared for the next stage of training. The men who had once viewed her primarily as a voice on the radio now looked at her differently, though none said it aloud. Respect in special operations was rarely given in speeches. It lived in nods, in quiet acknowledgement, in the way Rodriguez handed her the rifle without hesitation as they left the debriefing. Beyond the base, the intelligence they had gathered rippled outward. The maps and intercepts pulled from the compound revealed the structure of Taliban leadership in the region. Follow-on missions dismantled networks that had launched coordinated attacks, Lives were saved not only in the valley that day, but across the theater in the weeks that followed. The enemy had underestimated them, believing they could trap a SEAL team with precision tactics. They had not accounted for the Air Force combat controller who saw patterns others missed and who held the calm to act when no one else could. In the end, Emily's story became a case study. Instructors at training schools spoke of the ridge, of the 3 shots fired by someone whose role was never meant to be a marksman's. They taught it as proof that capability mattered more than job title, that survival often depended on the hidden skills within a team. Students wrote the numbers down: 650 meters, 720 meters, 800 meters. But the real lesson lived in the silence that followed each shot. The Afghan mountains held that silence still. Jagged ridges stood as witnesses, their stone faces echoing with the memory of 3 perfect shots that defined a mission, saved a team, and transformed a career. In the end, Emily Johnson's legacy was not in the labels she carried, but in the truth she had proven. When the moment comes, heroes are not defined by their job description. They are defined by the choices they make under fire and the calm resolve that turns retreat into victory.